Shalom, shalom. This is your brother Yeshaya Yisrael. Want to give honor and praise unto Yah, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Want to sit there and take this time out now to present a subject matter that might seem controversial to some and clarity for others. Israelites do not hate Africa. It is not even in the best interest of Israelites to hate Africa. According to the studies that I personally have done, Africa was named by European people in honor of the European general Scipio Africanus. Now, there are those who say that that is not accurate and that Africa was named by African people itself. What language of the African people that they say can be derived from, I'm not sure. I've heard one thing saying that it came from an ancient Egyptian word, mentuneta, something like that. And then another reason somebody gave, it came from a city that was in Tunisia. So far, personally, I've heard and seen two different sources of saying where black people were the ones who were responsible for Africa being named Africa. Then there's a lot of Israelites who teach that Africa was named by black people from the line of the Shemite people from the land of Epher, in which they say Africa is derived from that. So far, I've heard about four different reasons on how Africa got its name. You understand? The most popular one being that it was named by European people in honor of Scipio Africanus. Now, let's even understand, taking aside with different evidence from different sources about where Africa received its name from, and realize that Africa is a continent. Africa is not a country. Africa was never monolithic. Africa has different languages, different cultures, different people within it. For instance, the culture of the Awikam is different than the culture of the Seeri. The culture of the Suri people is different than the culture of the Falasha. The culture of the Zulu is different than the culture of the Berbers. You understand? So that just goes to show you that there are different cultures, different languages within the same continent. So one of the things Israelites are presenting when we say that we are not African, what we are saying, brothers and sisters, is that you cannot identify a people by a continent. And many times when you speak to people from Africa, they will tell you that they say that they're African when talking to people from America, because they feel that black Americans don't know the difference between tribe, country, land mass, and continent. So they'll say something to the effect of saying, well, yeah, I'm just African, just leave it at that. Same thing when you find some people from the Far East and Asia do. They don't, when they speak to a lot of black people in America, they don't necessarily say, okay, I'm Japanese or I'm Chinese or I'm Korean, unless they're correcting a black person about something. They just say, yeah, I'm Asian, and just leave it at that. So, but what a lot of nations know and understand that we over here in the West do not know is the fact that even before colonialism, even before they divided North and South Vietnam, even before they divided Nubia and Ethiopia, the people already knew that they had their own lands, languages, and cultures. You understand? So let that be noted and understood. Now, there are different nations and different peoples, and one of the most common references that I use in describing that is the fact that ancient Egyptians, which were people in Africa, were very nationalistic. This has been discussed several times. As stated, Israelites don't hate Africa. What we are attempting to do when you see Israelites post things or make a comment saying, I'm a Hebrew Israelite, I'm not African, is that they identifying which part of the human family that they belong to. Now, according to scientific research, they teach that in earth science that the tectonic plates and so forth and so on, where the land of Israel is and where parts of the African continent are still under the same tectonic plates. So then we have to ask ourselves, what happened then to separate what is called the African land mass and what we call the Levant? Is by one thing, they had what they called the Suez Canal, in which they sat there and did that like in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and so forth and so on. So in 1902, somebody named Mahan decided it was a good idea to coin the term the Middle East, which is basically saying that you have Egypt of today, Libya, the Sinai, Saudi Arabia, certain parts of Turkey and Greece, certain parts of Oman and Jordan, and certain other parts of Iraq and everything now being associated by its own particular thing. And you have people who don't know the history, unfortunately, of what happened, and they say, oh no, those people are Middle Eastern. But every people, brothers and sisters, have a land, language, and culture. So if you're lacking any one of those three, therefore you're not part of the human family tree. You understand? There's no language called African. There's no language called Middle Eastern. Therefore, there can be no people called African nor people called Middle Eastern. These are terminologies that have been made up as one goes along. Earlier in the course of the day, I saw a video in which some sisters from Ghana were sitting there saying that that they proud to be a Ghanaian people. That just proves the point that people even in Africa, while they in Africa, do not say that they're African people. They identify what land, what language, and what culture that they belong to. And that's very important. But we over here don't know our land, language, and culture. You understand? And so many times you have it to where people just look at the outward appearance and say, okay, they're black, I'm black, so I'm going to just claim the entire thing. And you cannot do that. Now, let's get into the history a little bit about Israel or Israel in reference with Africa. Isaiah chapter 11, as well as Jeremiah 44, as well as Zephaniah 3, or actually speak about Israelites being in certain places of Africa. One thing in particular, Zephaniah 3 verse 10, a prophet who lived in the 7th century BCE among the Israelites, where he said that the Most High will gather the daughter of his dispersed of his people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. What are the rivers of Ethiopia? That is to say of today, called the White and the Blue Nile. So beyond that, you have to go west, because if you went east, you get into the Indian Ocean. So you're going west, and that's where scholars such as the author of Babylon and Timbuktu speaks about how Israel was scattered into other places in what we call the continent of Africa. You got the record that was left by Eldad the Danite. You had the people who call themselves Beta Israel, who are called Falashas, that actually speak about when they say the Sabbatean River, in which runs in different parts, according to their teaching now, that runs in different parts of the world where the tribes of Israel were scattered. The Assyrian records speak about capturing the children of Israel. And world records speak about Babylon defeating the Assyrians. And world records speak about Babylon capturing the tribe of Judah. And world records speak about the tribe of Judah being sent back to the land of Israel after the era when Babylon fell and the Persians came up as a power. Then you had the Israelites and the people of Elephantine Island, that being one case, that dating to the time of Cambyses and a little bit after. Then you of Persia, that's being Egypt's 27th dynasty. Then you had the situation with Du-Nuwas and everything like that from Ethiopia and what they call the land of Sheba, and the reference with that. You had the Israelites over in the land of Yathrib, which is over in Saudi Arabia, and so forth and so on. Now, Sheba in the Bible, the descendants of Cush, let's understand that that is talking about the present day Ethiopia, as well as in the lower lands of what we call Saudi Arabia of today. You see, so what they've done in trying to separate what they call Western Asia and what they refer to as the African continent was systematically done so that way people can sit there and feel that they are not this, that, or the third. You understand? When you are sitting here saying to an Israelite, no, you're an African, what you're saying is me being an Israelite is not special, and that I must sit there and embrace everything that just looks like me. And that right there is emphatically, absolutely disrespectful, to get right down into it. If you look, for instance, at even the book that Alex Haley wrote, For What It's Worth, in Roots, when they had Kunta speaking to Kizzy, and she was saying, oh yeah, you came out of Africa. And he was saying, well, Africa is the place, but the people is the Mandinka. You see, so he was still, even in that, identifying what part he belonged to. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if you call a person that came from the Ashanti or that came out of the Fulani tribe and say, oh yeah, y'all African, that person from the Ashanti and the Fulani realizes that you don't understand land, language, culture, tribe, and clan, you may say. You understand? They just sit there and associate them as all one. And that right there is actually quite disrespectful, as if the Fulani don't have their particular customs in their own culture, that the Ashanti don't have their particular customs in their culture, that the Beta Israel and Ethiopia don't have their own particular customs in their own culture. You understand? So basically, when you tell a brother or sister over here, even in the West, that no, y'all not Israelites, y'all basically are Africans, what you're saying is that we don't have our own particular land, language, and culture within the world. You see, Africa is part of the world. And so let that be noted and understood. The ancient Egyptians, they knew that emphatically. You know, this is why when you read even in the records of Senusret III of the pharaohs of the 12th dynasty, and how he spoke about the people of Tessati, or the people called the Ethiopians of later on, and the people of Nubia and everything like that, he noted that there was a distinction between each of them nations or each of them peoples. It doesn't mean I'm looking down on you. It doesn't mean I hate you. It just means I know my place and I know my order. Within the nation of Israel, you had a branch that came out of that called the tribe of Judah. And out of the tribe of Judah, you had a branch called the house of David. Out of the children of Israel, you had a branch called the tribe of the Levites. Now, out of the tribe of the Levites, you had the Kohathites, the Merariites, the Gershonites, and the Aaronites that came out of the Kohathites. So all of that shows that there was an order to certain things. You see, everyone is not just one big old melting pot of the same, as if we see in America. You understand? And what happens, unfortunately, is that a lot of our people sometimes even use a profanity, disrespectful language, as if he or she has no understanding when a brother who is an Israelite or a sister who is an Israelite say, what is our land, language, and culture? Oh, I'm just telling you, you're just African. You didn't tell me nothing deep. I can sit there and look inside of an elementary book and sit there and say, okay, the slave ships came out of Africa. And what happens, unfortunately, is that a lot of times people want to sit there and associate, Africa, and then they want to pimp Egypt. We went over this several times in presentations. You can't do that. You can't sit there and comfortably tell us as Israelites, okay, y'all African and Egyptian records and everything like that, when there was no slave ships that left from out of the land of Egypt. You understand? The slave ships left from Western Africa, Central Africa, and what is very seldomly spoken about, actually, the island of Madagascar, which is also a part of African continent. But the people of Madagascar don't call themselves African. They call themselves whatever land, language, and culture that they have within that continent. You understand? So that's very, very important to let it be noted and understood what part you fit in on the earth. Because by just calling yourself after a continent, you don't know your uniqueness. You don't know your specialty. You don't know where you fit in at. And we are a special people. Every people on the earth to themselves is a special people. But as stated, there is no land, language, and culture. I state again, land, language, and culture called African. There's no language called African. You cannot speak African. You understand? That's just a term that they use for a conglomerate of different people that live on a particular landmass. So that right there has to be noted and understood. And another issue is that you do seem to have some Israelites who try to bang or bash or disrespect the people within what we call the continent of Africa. And that is a response to some of the things that many people in Africa say about us over here in the Western Hemisphere. So what we have to do is eliminate that kind of animosity that comes between us. Because what a lot of Israelites in the West may not know is that there are thousands and thousands upon thousands of Israelites throughout Nigeria, throughout Ghana. The Igbo Israelites always talking about how they lay claim to be in Israel, and how the Igbo was taken to Jamaica as slaves, and then from Jamaica, when the Spanish who was running Jamaica lost to the British in the 17th century, and how many of the people in Jamaica was shipped over into the United States of today in slavery. So a lot of the times and a lot of things, people have to sit back and not have no ill feelings or ill thoughts and so forth and so on. So in concluding, just want to sit there and state that on average, the wise brother and sister who is an Israelite that says that he or she is not an African is basically saying that he or she is laying claim to a particular part of the world. It's not saying that, oh, we should hate on Africa, because you got people in Africa who will tell you that they are a particular branch of the human family. So let that be noted and understood. All right. Shalom.